So now that we have the dwarf rig referenced into our scene, let's go ahead and just begin going over the rig itself and see some of the controls that we have available to us. And the rig itself is a pretty basic rig, but it should give us the functionality that we'll need to create some of the basic animations that we'll be creating within this course. So the first thing that I like to do whenever I'm opening up a brand new rig that I haven't used before is just take some time to go in here and actually just begin manipulating some of the controls and just get used to what control does what. So the first thing I like to do is find the root control or the center of gravity control. So if we go ahead and zoom in here, it should be this center control right here. And this will control sort of the entire character's root. So if we grab this, you can see we're able to move our character around and everything is following along with it. Now, when we have the root selected, we know that if we just go up this chain here, the next control will control his spine here, the lower spine, and then the next control up will control the mid spine and so on. So we have quite a few spine controls here that give us a lot of flexibility on actually manipulating the character here. Now, if you need a quick refresher on some of the tools that I'm using here in order to rotate and move things around, W allows you to jump to the actual move tool, E jumps to the rotate tool, and then R jumps to the scale tool. So as I'm moving along here and beginning to manipulate some of these controls around, I'll probably be jumping between the move and the rotate tool. So using the W and E key to do that will allow you to quickly jump between those manipulators. So those are our spine controls, and you can see we're able to get some flexibility in here. Now, one thing you'll quickly notice is that depending on how far you begin to rotate these controls, the rig can start to break. So it's also really important that you're going in here and you're taking a look at some of these breaking points on the rig itself. So you can see as we rotate side to side, we're actually able to get quite a bit of flexibility on the Z axis for the spine control. But you can see once we get to this point, we're starting to get some broken deformations there, but it's not actually too bad. If we rotate on the Y axis, you can see the rig starts to break just a little bit faster there. You can see we're getting some penetration into the actual shirt itself from the chest geometry. Now, depending on your pipeline and depending on where you are in the actual project itself, it could be something that you actually bring up to the rigger. So you can go in here and begin doing some tests. And maybe if you feel like you'd want a little bit more flexibility on the rig and have the rig be able to rotate a little bit further without seeing that breaking point, you could bring this up to the rigger and see if this is something they could begin to adjust, maybe with the actual weight painting during the skinning process for the controls. But as we move on here, we have the shoulder controls here on both sides. And then this control is the neck. And you can see here on the neck, we're able to get some flexibility here. But again, there's a breaking point to this where you start to see that neck geometry kind of penetrate the shirt there. And then as we move on, we have the actual control for the pauldron or shoulder pad here. And then we have the controls for the feet. And if you select one of these feet controls, you have another attribute within the channel box called foot roll. And this is the actual foot roll control. And you can easily scrub this value by simply just holding your middle mouse within the viewport, clicking and dragging, and that will allow you to scrub that value back and forth. We can set that back to its default value of 0. And then out here, we have the knee controls for both sides. And then if we take a look at the arms, we have those same type of controls for the elbows. So we're able to move those elbows around to wherever we need them. And again, you can see that depending on where you move this elbow, could start to break the rig a little bit, but it's not too bad there. Now, one thing to point out is that on this rig, we actually don't have a pure FK control setup for the arms itself. Currently, it's using this type of IK setup. However, the IK setup is also following sort of the body space of the character, meaning if we move the root control around, the arms are going to follow along with it, which is actually not something you would typically see in a pure IK setup. So typically, if it was a pure IK setup, you would move the root around and the hands would stay locked where they're at. Now you can see that if we move this hand around, we grab the root control, that hand is going to follow along with it. So we have this IK control that allows us to quickly position the arm where we need to. However, it's sort of following the body space of the character, meaning that when we grab the center of gravity or this root control, the arms are still going to follow along with it. Now, this can be definitely helpful when you're animating. However, it could present a few difficulties as we're beginning to animate, because anytime you move that root control around, the arms are going to follow along with it. So if you want your arms maybe to stay behind, then you would have to sort of counter that animation with the arm itself. But we can kind of go over that process once we actually jump into animation on this dwarf rig. Now, a few of the other final controls that we have is the pelvis control. That allows you to move the hips around. We can also translate that around. And then we also have the beard controls here. So with these controls, we can actually control his beard as well as his jaw. You can see the control actually opens and closes the jaw. And then these controls further down the chain allow us to have some rough flexibility over the beard itself. So again, anytime you're working with a brand new rig like this, it's always a good idea to just jump in, do some basic manipulation, and kind of figure out those breaking points of the rig itself. So now that we've gone over a quick overview of our dwarf rig, let's actually continue on in the next module and begin creating the walk cycle for this dwarf.